Hi there, I'm Rob Detroit, Principal Consultant with Armoured Consulting, and welcome back to our series of industry conversations. In our role as independent consultants to the civilian armoured vehicle industry, one of our primary goals is to provide up-to-date information that is of a high technical content for members of the industry, particularly the procurement agencies, fleet managers and users. Today we continue our series of industry conversations by bringing you a conversation I recently had with Andy Brooks. Andy is the Business Development Director with UTAC Special Vehicles, a UK-based company specialising in systems integration, ballistic and blast protection, powertrain modifications, vehicle dynamics, design and production. In this conversation, we spoke about the evolution of civilian armoured vehicles, the importance of customer collaboration, and the innovations in design and manufacturing processes. We also covered topics including raising standards in vehicle design, the challenges of balancing mobility, protection and user comfort, and the significance of testing standards in the industry. And he also shared insights into the bolt-on design approach and how it enhances production efficiency while maintaining vehicle integrity. I hope you enjoyed this wide-ranging conversation as much as I had in recording it. And please, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below to keep up to date with all the new interviews and videos on our YouTube channel. So enough of me, please welcome Mr. Andy Brooks. Good morning and welcome back to one of our CAV Forum Industry Conversations. And this morning it's my great delight to introduce Andy Brooks, who is the Business Development Director with UTAC Special Vehicles in the United Kingdom. Andy, welcome to the conversation.
Thanks very much, Rob. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me on.
Excellent. Well done. All right. So as we do, let's start with a bit of a background. Please tell us a bit about yourself, your background, and a little bit about UTAC Special Vehicles.
Yeah, sure. So me personally, I always had an interest in vehicles. So I left university with a degree in automotive engineering, and then spent the rest of my career to date in what I'd call the sort of specialist vehicle conversion industry. So taking vehicles and converting them for special purposes. First of all, spent a brief period of time as a technician, and then progressed into the engineering side of the first business that I joined, which also came with project management as well in that role. And then progressed as my career went on into sort of technical sales and then business development, where I am now. I guess the early part of my career was spent mainly converting vehicles of a sort of commercial vehicle type for utility industry, emergency services sectors. And then I moved to a company where the focus was on cash in transit. So that's when I kind of got involved firstly with armoured vehicles. And then I joined UTAC Special Vehicles 10 years ago. And then that's where my role now started, and I got a lot more involved in civilian armoured vehicles at that point. And then in terms of the company itself, UTAC Special Vehicles is part of the UTAC group of companies, and we are ourselves based at the UTAC Millbrook Proving Ground in the UK. The group as a whole, its main business is providing services for the mobility industry. We've got sites across the world where we can conduct tests in laboratories or on test tracks at one of our 4 proving grounds. We've got 2 in France, 1 in Morocco, 1 in Finland, and 1 in the UK. The Millbrook site, from where we originate, was built by GM in the late 1960s. And we were under GM ownership up until about 10, 12 years ago. And then UTAC Special Vehicles itself came into existence, I guess, in the late 90s, where firstly we created a department to convert vehicles to use LPG, and then latterly we progressed into building vehicles for the emergency services and sort of police and security. So we moved into that arena. And then in 2012, we created within the Special Vehicles Department what we called the Armoured Vehicle Group. And that was to focus on the development and build of civilian armoured vehicles. And so for the last 13 years, that's a service that we offer to customers. And during that time, we've produced close to 1,000 civilian armoured vehicles on a variety of different platforms. But it's also worth noting that's not all that we do. We also get involved in other projects. So, for instance, we've built electric vans, we've repowered buses so that they're using powertrains of the latest emission standards. So we get involved in lots of projects which are what I'd say converting vehicles or building vehicles, at times it's we get some strange requests, but it's very rare that we say no immediately. We like to listen to our customers, see what they've got to offer, and see what we can get involved in.
Excellent. And look, it's interesting. You're saying that you've been doing civilian armoured vehicles the last 13 years, and the market, the industry has changed significantly. I recall my days. I'm going back 2003 or so, when the Australian Army was deployed into Solomon Islands on a police mission to bring stability. There was a civil disturbance there, almost a civil war, if you like. And so some very early versions of the civilian armoured vehicles were deployed. It was basically taking a sheet of armour steel and bolting it to the inside of the door panel and saying, there you go. And that's obviously not how vehicles are designed today. So maybe you'd like to share some of your thoughts and your experiences of how you've seen the market and the industry and the designs develop over the 13 years that you've been building them.
Sure. I mean, I can definitely say that we've seen standards raise over that time. That there's no question on that. I think there's a number of factors. I would say you've got test standards. I think have evolved, which is I guess driven by the industry as a whole, and can only be a good thing. Examples in the UK are the PAS 300 and PAS 301 standards for civilian armoured vehicles, which I know Chris Game, our chief engineer, has talked about in the past. I think customer requirements and expectations have also, driven that as well. So, for example, it used to be accepted, I think, when we first started building vehicles, that we could use suitably tested materials and a proven design methodology, and then perhaps have that reviewed by impartial experts to say, yes, we're happy that that design using that material is fit for purpose for defeating that threat. But I think things have moved on now, and our customers want fully tested and certified vehicles, and there's no real going back from that. I think technology has definitely evolved, along with continuous improvement processes that we drive internally as well. So a good example of that is the way that we trim the interior of vehicles. In the early days, I would say that could be quite crude, as you described with maybe the Armouring, just flat panels and things like that. But now we're doing things like developing and having manufactured our own bespoke door cards and pillar trims to be as close to OEM as possible. So when people get into the vehicle, they won't necessarily know that those panels weren't OEM in the first place. So I think that's definitely changed, and we get a lot of positive feedback on that front. And then I think also the organisations that we're working for, there's a real focus on the kind of duty of care element, and the fact that they need to ensure that their staff and the operators of the vehicles need to be safe at all times. And so, I think that has definitely played a part as well. So I think there are quite a few changes that have happened over the years, and there's so many elements that I think are the reason for those changes.
All right, very good. And you mentioned too about the users, and certainly as technology has changed, materials have changed, and I think as companies like yourself have matured in learning how to design and build, certainly how you were doing it 13 years ago is significantly different, and say with respect, maybe more immature compared to today, because you do, by learning, as you said, continuous improvement process. Certainly, how have you found your customers in relation to their demands and their understanding of both the threats that they face in high hostile areas, or even not necessarily hostile areas like police and special forces, if you like, within in the domestic scene, and
Yeah,
their ability to appreciate the nature of the protective asset that they're investing in and their requirements and how they therefore interact with it as users.
I think certainly what I've found is it's a very interactive process with the customer, and the best solutions come when we collaborate very closely with the customers and users of the vehicles. So, everyone has their expertise within that, what, if we want to call it a partnership. And, I'm not an operator of these vehicles, and nor are any of my colleagues on my side. So we have to be led by the customer on that front. They're the experts in the operational environment that they need to work in and the threats that are there. We bring to the party the engineering, the design, the development, and basically fulfilling the requirements that the customers put down. But there are inevitably compromises along the way. So it's about that dialogue. It's about really working together to create the best possible solution for the customer within those constraints that we need to work in.
Indeed. I remember when I was with the Australian government and we were building, it was a Toyota Hilux for our security services, and given the nature of the design, and I was working with the manufacturer at the time. It wasn't you, but dealing with the Up Armour manufacturing at the time. The interior door panels were replaced, again because of the nature of the doors and the armouring and the particular design of the armouring that my client, if you like, I was the sort of the project director for a specialist group within the government, and we were doing a design review, and that's an important part. We can talk about that as well. And we got into the vehicle, and the Hilux is actually quite a narrow vehicle in its own right. And by the time we sat in the vehicle and the inside door panel was against, the sides of our bodies, we ended up sitting like this. And the manufacturer, just as you're saying too, not being an operator, didn't quite appreciate. They created a terrific panel, but when you then came to use it didn't quite work. And so there's this iterative design of testing, reviewing, and then changing the design, retesting and reviewing, and then testing it again. It's sort of sometimes in development they call it a waterfall type of process. And certainly that input and that interaction with the user it's a critical element. It's not like Henry Ford. You can have any type of armoured vehicle as long as you buy the same one that everyone else buys. Well, my needs are different. If I have to transport a diplomat to the airport, it's certainly different than driving around the back streets of Afghanistan, etc. So that's a critical part of it too. Indeed. All right. And so part of that too is that balance between mobility protection, discretion, and also user comfort and the usability, the user dynamics within the vehicle. So you've had experience, obviously, dealing with various of your clients, and are there any sort of experiences that you can share of how you've been able to balance and or even compromise in some of the projects that you've worked on?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question because that it is a compromise because our aim is basically to produce the best product that we can to meet the customer requirements, but working within a number of constraints. So you've got the constraints of time and resource, because customers they don't want us to wait or don't want to wait years for us to develop the perfect product.
Now.
Yeah, that often with our customers being government, they're constrained by fiscal years. So it's like, right, we've got a requirement. There's the deadline. You must deliver it by then. Then you've got obviously the budget side of things. So, budgets are tight. We'd love to design, anything, but things come at a cost. So budget is another one. And then the vehicles themselves are another constraint because of their size, shape, and the design. The OEM never built the vehicle with Armouring in mind. So, we've got to design something that works in harmony with the base vehicle. So those are the kind of compromises or constraints that we're working within. And so, I mean, maybe a good example of kind of compromises, I quite often use this one, is with opaque armour. Because without going into the real technical detail about materials to use, I always talk about the triangle of cost, weight, and packaging. Okay. So for 95% of opaque armour, we use like a high hardness steel rather than composites. And the reason that we tend to go that route is because it's cheaper, so that helps on the budget side. It's easier to package because it's thinner than composites generally are. But the compromise to that is weight, because we know that composite armour can be quite lightweight in comparison to steel. So we have to compromise there, and then we rely on our expertise in, say, chassis development, because we've added that additional weight onto the vehicle, to help with the fact that we've gone that route with the armour. And then the benefits are also with packaging, with the thinner material, because then we can keep the ergonomics of the vehicle as close to OEM as possible, which is going back to what you were saying about being in the back of a vehicle and being restrained. If you can maximize the volume inside of the vehicle, then that's good for the operator of the vehicle. So yeah, that's certainly an area that I use as an example of where we have to kind of balance these things. And I think the other thing is, economies of scale definitely help when it comes to what we can do within sort of budgets. So if we're building more vehicles, we can spend more effort in the design and development phase, and with volume we can really put effort into things like production aids, jigs, fixtures, mechanical aids, and really drive efficiency. So maybe the upfront costs are quite high, but then we can gain some of that back on the production side and help the budget in that respect.
And look, it's interesting. One of the issues that you raise is the limitations of the base vehicle, and it's an interesting industry in that you're taking a commercial off-the-shelf vehicle that was designed for a farmer to use on his farm, such as, say, the Land Cruiser, the 70 series, 76, let's say. And I know in Australia it's a very popular vehicle, and they call them chookies, the farmers. And they'll run it for 1 million kilometres. It'll look like horrible, but the engine will keep going. They'll keep repairing it, and they'll run it for 15 years. because Toyota builds a very good base vehicle.
Yeah.
But it wasn't designed with armouring in mind for, and particularly, let's say, security services that have body armour, body kit, might be a larger build as compared to a civilian who might be with an NGO or a diplomatic mission. And so you have situations, again, let's take the 76, where the amount of passenger space in the rear seats is limited. And for a person who might be 6 foot, 6'2", who might be a bit larger, say, I don't know, 100 kilos, you're going to struggle. It's just the way it's going to be. And particularly the degree by which the rear door can open and getting in and out. And if you're then again wearing some type of body armor, body suit, etc., it's a great challenge. And as coming from a user's perspective, trying to talk to farmers like yourself to say, fix it. No, I need more space. It's not going to work, but I have to use this space vehicle. And I think that's one of the great challenges you have, is trying to balance, manage expectations and maximising the capability that you're developing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely agree.
Yeah. All right. And, given confidentialities along the way, can you tell us about some of the sort of the types of clientele that you work with? I would imagine, some of the security service, police services, or diplomatic corps would be some of the type of people that you work with.
Yeah, sure. I'll keep it fairly high level, but our customers historically have been UK government departments and continue to be, and that's either directly or it could be via the OEM. So I think you're aware that we convert Skoda products into civilian armoured vehicles. So in that case, we've gone via the OEM, in this instance, Skoda UK. But we're also trying to expand our reach and hope to provide, the types of vehicles we build to other, OEMs and friendly governments in the future. So I would say, compared to maybe other manufacturers, we're quite new to the market. Other people have been doing it a lot longer than us, but we're hopeful for the future. We think we build a good product, and we think we have good support from our customers and good feedback from our customers.
And are your designs tested against the PAS 301 from a mobility side, from the VPAM standards? Can you describe?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we certainly the demand being from the UK is against the PAS standards, so PAS 300 and 301 from the automotive elements. But we are mindful of the other standards out there in the marketplace being demanded by customers from other areas of the world. So in terms of VPAM, when we've been doing the testing in the UK, we've got a close eye on that standard, and whether we can, hopefully adhere to multiple standards by doing one test, which I would say we've done successfully. But I'll leave it to the experts to judge how comparable those standards are, and and who can carry those out. I know we've had lots of discussions on that at various events, including the CAV Forum, Rob. So yeah, that will no doubt continue.
Oh, indeed. And excuse me. So look, indeed, and the issue of testing standards is controversial from the term of the word itself, being that there are different regions, whether Europe, England, United States, different organisations, different governments have different standards, and whilst they're different, they are similar. It's not necessarily possible to cross-reference exactly one to another. But as you said earlier on, one of the important developments within the industry is that there are standards, which means that if you have two vehicles built to, let's say, being tested against PAS 301 from a mobility perspective, you can then compare and contrast the two vehicles against the same testing standard. And from the user's perspective, that's important in that it's difficult sometimes to compare a proposal from three different manufacturers. How do you compare those products? Leave aside the commercial, the price side of things, from a technical side. And certainly trying to compare the PAS and the VPAMs or the American standards has its challenges. But being able to, as a user to look at a vehicle, to assess it technically, and then understand the data behind the testing regime and the testing methodology enables then somebody to make a rational decision there. And that's an important development along the way. And so that actually leads to the next question of how have you seen some of the newer developments in the industry in relation to maybe design work, the capability of designing a civilian armoured vehicle and the manufacturing process, whether it's by processes, by the equipment that you use, the materials that are changing. You mentioned about opaque armour before. How have you seen some of these latest developments, and how have you been able to incorporate them into your processes as an up armourer?
Yeah, okay. Again, I've seen that develop over the time that I've been with the company and the time that we've been building civilian armoured vehicles. So from, let's say, our earlier projects, we used sort of what I'd call conventional armouring techniques. So cold form steel, bent, welded, which we still do with certain components. But what we've tried to do in recent times is move to using hot formed steel armour for the higher volume builds. I say high volume builds because it's expensive to develop. So the business has to justify the upfront expenditure because the costs for developing and creating the tooling for those parts is expensive, but I think it pays dividends over the long term. So what we try and do with the hot form panels is use those for the larger armour panels which have complex geometry. So examples are being the side panels, the roof and the bulkhead, maybe some smaller parts if we can incorporate those into the tooling as well. But what it allows is us to more closely follow the shape of the OEM body in white. That helps to minimise the intrusion into the vehicle and therefore maximise interior space and door apertures, which again we've talked about being something that's really beneficial. Other benefits include the fact that we've reduced the number of joints significantly as they're one-piece panels. So that has the benefit of greater integrity of the armour, as the welding can introduce weaknesses such as heat affected zones, which you might then need to again protect against by using backing panels or such like. It allows for a lighter construction, and it allows for efficiency of the production process. So we're reducing the number of welds required within that build. We also have developed a bolt together solution, so we can we've actually done it. We created a freestanding cell outside of the vehicle just to demonstrate that it can hold its own weight together when it's bolted together. So again, that helps us in the production process and with efficiencies. And then the conformity of the parts is really tightly controlled because of the hot formed armour process. So the tolerance is kept really tight, and there's very little variation in the parts. So that helps with your conformity of production. So I think that's one area where I think from let's say an armouring perspective, we've used technology to help us progress the kind of product that we can offer. I think one of the other areas, just from a design and development perspective, is in 3D scanning technology, because we've worked with OEMs. We've developed vehicles without the input from the OEMs, but regardless, we don't get CAD data from OEMs. That's a really tightly guarded piece of data that they do not want going out into the world. So we respect that, and therefore we have to create our own version of their vehicle in our CAD technology. And with 3D scanning, that's allowed us to do that. I think it's fair to say it's over the last 10, 15 years, it's definitely become more accessible. I don't know what the price of it was a long time ago, but certainly I believe the price has come down, which has enabled us to purchase our own equipment, and then use that on a regular basis. And when I say regular, we're using it on a daily basis, because not only do we use it in the design and development process, we can also use it to check, let's say, the tolerance of parts coming into the business once we're in production. So it's been massively beneficial to us. So that's an area where I think has really aided us over the last 10, 12 years.
It's interesting you say that, and I did a project many years ago when I was with Defence Materiel organisation, part of the Defence Department of Australia. We were building blast and ballistic protected cabins for Unimog and Mack trucks for the engineering corps of the Australian Army. And so the theory was, and it worked for the Unimogs, where we built the cabins and built them on one after another, and then brought the old vehicle in, took the soft skin cabin off, and then installed the hardened skin, the protective cabin onto the vehicle. Away it went. And for the Unimogs, maybe because it's of German origin, it worked every time. When we came to the Mack trucks, it didn't. The bolt holes in the chassis rails for which the cabin was then mounted were in a different location on every truck. And so it was only after the second and third one that the designers then realised that having a set area for the bolt hole to attach the cabin to the chassis rails could not be fixed. It had to be flexible enough to take into account the fact that each individual base vehicle was unique. Well, thank you, Mack trucks. So, saying, well, every Mack truck is the same, except it's all very different. So that's the flexibility, and maybe the type of equipment you're describing can certainly assist in understanding that before it goes through into production. And it's interesting. Maybe tell us a little bit more about your bolt-on design. Certainly, there are a number of companies, not huge that I'm aware of, but a number of companies that have come up with bolt-together type designs, and it's not common. The cut weld design is certainly the most common design out there. If you can describe a little bit more about it and how it works, and what are the advantages or maybe the disadvantages as compared to the traditional.
Yeah. Well, I think the advantages are, again, going back to minimising welds and the potential for welding to cause weaknesses in the material. So that's a definite advantage. And because we're taking quite large panels and bolting them together. So we're taking the two side panels, bolting putting them into the vehicle, and then putting the roof panel in and bolting that to those side panels. Yeah, that takes quite a lot of welding away, because long. If you imagine you're welding that into a vehicle, that's got long lengths of weld. But also from a speed of assembly perspective, that's also helping us. I think, if memory serves me correctly, we can probably armour a vehicle within, let's say, a day once it's fully stripped out. In respect of some of our products that have that bolt together solution. So it certainly helps with reduction of man hours. Of course, we've had to with the panels being so big, we've had to develop ways of getting them into the vehicle, because lots of small pieces can go into the vehicle quite easily, but we've got to find a way of getting a large panel into the vehicle. So that can be a challenge for our team, but they find ways around this and create quite unique solutions for handling large heavy parts. So yeah, it's very interesting, and I would, it's one of those ones where it's really good for people to see what you do. And I would always say to customers and people that are interested, like yourself, Rob, come along and see what we do, because I love to show people what we get up to in our workshop, and our team are really happy to share that as well, and because they're really proud in what they do. So yeah, seeing is believing.
Indeed. And look, the comments you've made of certainly labour saving, you're not compromising potentially in certain areas within the steel, the opaque armour, by virtue of the heat-affected areas, and the weld joints themselves are weaker than the steel itself. So there's certainly advantages, and it's interesting that it's still not a common methodology, and I would imagine that the upfront engineering design is a greater investment as compared to just cut and welds, where a skilled welder can certainly do that along the way.
So, yeah, I think it's also important to say that, going back to that sort of collaborative process, our engineers and technicians work really closely together to develop this. So it's not, one doesn't dictate to the other. It's a collaborative process, because yes, the engineers need to design this in CAD and have the parts manufactured, but it also needs to be assembled as well. And the technicians, they're the guys that are doing this on a day-to-day basis. So they've got really valuable feedback into how that vehicle goes together. And yeah, I can only say from our business perspective that it works really well as a team. So yeah.
Indeed. And I think if anyone's ever built a house or renovated a kitchen, can certainly appreciate that, because the designer of the house or the kitchen, the architect, will create the most beautiful design, and then he hands it across to the cabinet maker, who looks at it and goes, "You can't build it like this. It just doesn't work like that." So it's interesting you say the correlation and the connection between design and manufacturing. And I think there's actually a third element, being that of through life support. And I know when I was with Defence Materiel Organisation Australia, part of the Defence Department many years ago, they crunched these two entities together, the people who designed and procured the capability and the people who then had to maintain it in the field. And these are one of the areas in civilian armoured vehicles that we've seen some challenges, where a designer will design, let's say, for example, a battery, an opaque armoured steel battery cover, and there'll be a set of screws that will connect the cover plate to the actual structure of the box itself. And over time, this will rust. And then there is invariably, we see in the field, there's invariably challenges just to unscrew the top, to get the lid off. And therefore, it's an issue of getting that feedback and understanding how the user is going to use the capability to feed back into the design, into the manufacturing, and then taking account through life support. So maybe you'd like to tell us a little bit about how you do that in your manufacturing design process.
Yeah, sure. So I think, if I break down, I take the vehicle as a whole and break it down into the topics that we're kind of looking at. So first of all, we're looking at survivability. So we're looking at, blast and ballistic events, I suppose, but more likely road traffic collisions, right?
Yes.
So we're looking at that. Then we're looking at mobility. So, and I guess mobility helps us to avoid the events that I've just described. So in an ideal world, you don't get into those events in the first place. So how does the vehicle perform automotively? So acceleration, deceleration, ride and handling. These are things that we spend a lot of time looking at. So is it safe to drive? We have a saying, benign and predictable. So handling characteristics. Can anyone drive it? Oversteer, understeer. You know, it's not going to do something strange when we drive it. You know, to the edge of its limits. Is it comfortable for the people, you know, that are driving in the vehicle? Can it be driven at pace? Again, by, you know, someone like myself who's not a professional driver. Will it perform in different environments, including weather, different terrain, say off-road? And then I think in terms of mobility, I think maybe discretion falls into this category as well. So can the vehicle move around freely without attracting undue attention? And then we look at things like, you know, I guess some tells, like, is it running a different wheel? Well, we try and use a wheel that looks like OEM or is OEM. In fact, for one of our projects, we take the existing OEM wheel, and then we have that tested to the additional weight load that it's going to take. We might look at surface finishes of components, ride height of the vehicle to make sure that matches OEM, things like that. And then we come on to, I think, you know, kind of the question that you asked me, the other topic about reliability. So you've got, is the vehicle durable? So we carry out durability testing. So we've got a proving ground. We can put our vehicles through accelerated durability tests. And then we need to derive a service schedule. So, you know, what data are we using for that? So again, we've got a proving ground. We can carry out various tests to derive a service schedule. Have we designed it with servicing in mind? So we've got a service schedule. Okay, that's for serviceable parts, but there are parts that might break that we haven't predicted, or there might be areas that have been damaged. So have we designed it with servicing in mind? Can we access, you know, can we get into doors to access components, locks within doors easily in case of failure? So we're looking at that side as well. And then we're also looking at documentation. So, you know, have we provided a user manual so that the operator knows how to use the vehicle? Have we provided a service manual so someone can service the vehicle, be it us or the user or a third party? So we're looking at all of these things. And I think, what am I trying to say here? We put a lot of focus on the automotive elements of a civilian armoured vehicle, as you probably expect, given our background. You know, someone said this to me, and I hadn't really realised it until I showed them round our facility, and they said, "Oh wow, you're an automotive manufacturer, but applying these skills to armouring rather than the other way round." So that's and it's true. When I thought about it, okay, and it's true through, I would say, all phases of a project, from design and development, where we put a lot of emphasis on testing, be that blast and ballistic, but I'm really talking about automotive testing now. But also during build, where we're trying to optimize the build process to ensure that it's efficient and repeatable. And then once the vehicle goes into service, much like automotive manufacturers do, you know, that's only the start. A vehicle goes into service, it's the start of the next phase of its journey. So yeah, I think that there are many things that you need to consider when building the civilian armoured vehicle, and you need to take account of all of them across its whole life cycle. So yeah, that's what we try and do, as best as possible. And yeah.
You know, it's interesting. You talk about user manuals, technical documentation. I used to have hair in the olden days, and then I started dealing with manufacturers and the issue of technical documentation. And it started back in my defence days, where a manufacturer would very keenly create the capability, and then when you had to, towards the end of the project, do the technical documentation, it's just a nightmare. And I was hammered by the Ramey chaps, the Royal Electrical Mechanical Engineering team that was always part of our project teams, engineers, and they're saying, look, we've got to keep this kit in the field, might be in Iraq or in Afghanistan, and there's just no documentation how to maintain it. And so there is this relationship, as I alluded to before, between the capability design and the resources used to do that, then the manufacturing, and again, the kitchen scenario, and then the through life support. And all three need to understand the role that they play and the importance of each of the facets within it, of which, how to use the capability. And if they misuse it, well, of course, the vehicle will break, so to speak, because it was never designed to do something that someone did because he didn't know that they couldn't do it along the way. All right. So it is certainly a great challenge along the way. And, you're talking about discretion as well before that challenge to try and make a vehicle, a civilian armoured vehicle, such that it looks like a normal vehicle. And as we say to our clients, look, you can certainly do that to a vast extent. The industry is well experienced after 20, 25 years of making such vehicles. Certainly the beauty rings or the frames around the windows are a main giveaway, as is the height of the vehicle, that it's been modified to an extent. And when you're in the Badlands, the bad guys, they know you. They know you're driving an armoured vehicle. So it's good for some situations, but for the ones that maybe are the greater threats, the user has to acknowledge that the threat entities out there will know that, in essence, they are travelling in a civilian armoured vehicle. So there's only X much that they can do. And I think that's the balance that you as manufacturers, there's only so much you can do on armouring, on mobility, and on discretion in relation to taking a OEM passenger vehicle and making it into a protected mode of transport. So it's the challenge of the industry. And talking about challenges, there are really two that are coming up in conversation everywhere you travel today. One is that of AI, and the other one is about electric vehicles. So maybe let's start with AI. And I think we're still in the early days of AI and design and engineering, hard engineering, not coding, for which AI is quite famous for. But have you come across any issues or experiences of the involvement of AI in the design or the manufacturing, the back office, supply chain, that type of thing involved with your organisation?
Yeah, I mean, we have to take advantage of AI or machine learning as we move forward. We know it's got huge potential. I would say from our perspective, we're treading cautiously, and we have a AI policy in place to control how to use it, because we don't want it being used, in the wrong manner or in a manner which doesn't help us. So we have to be slightly cautious. But I'm going to speak from a personal perspective and see and tell you where I see applications in the industry. Because AI is great, I think, if you give it large amounts of data, it's great at looking at that data and coming up with solutions. So just putting my own thoughts down, I thought, well, fleet maintenance has got to be one area where I think it could be a real advantage. So deriving service schedules, predicting when maintenance is required. Could you use AI and feed it with real world usage data for how civilian armoured vehicles are used, and then derive durability schedules off the back of that we could test on our proving ground that are tailored to those customers' usage profiles. So I think that's one area that it could be really useful. I think it's already being used in the automotive world for things like ADAS, autonomous driving, and driver monitoring as well. So from a safety perspective, some real key things there. And then the other elements are things like the sort of human vehicle interface. So, like for instance, navigation and route planning. It might seem sort of rudimentary for you or I using trying to get from A to B using Google Maps, but probably someone
I depend on
in a high
Paul.
in a high threat environment, if you can get it to help you there with route planning, where perhaps you don't want to take the same route
Yes.
every day, you're trying to avoid certain areas. So I think navigation and route planning, and then you've got other things like voice recognition, driver sort of preferences and customization. So when you get into a vehicle, it knows how you want that vehicle set out. And I guess it's all those kind of things are taking the load away from the driver to allow the driver to concentrate on other things. And, having listened to your interviews before, Mark, who operated vehicles, these guys have got a serious job to do. And so if you can, take away any distractions and make their life easier, then I think it's got to be a good thing. So AI can no doubt help in that respect. But I think it's such a broad topic.
Oh, look, it is. And it's interesting on the fleet management side. I think you've hit on a very, very important area where, if there is a gap of capability and trying to find the right word of understanding and of appreciation and of actual performance, that's probably it. So, where the industry is underperforming is that on the fleet management side. And the key to it, which you did mention, is the data from the field. And we see it time and time again that there is minimal and almost, if I may say, infantile level of data integrity, excuse me, that comes from the field, and then into maybe a regional office, a country office, or the international office of an organisation, who can then take all this data. We say to our clients, look, you want this information, and you can do trend analysis. Now, we do it on spreadsheets, and it's not rocket science to do, but it takes a vast amount of data. The AI modelling can certainly do that way better than spreadsheet analysis can do it, and that's the advantage of it. But it needs the core data. And unfortunately, at this point in time, that's where the user community really doesn't step up to the plate as good as it could be. And, I suppose I'll give a plug for the CAV Forum this year, where fleet management efficiencies and systems and data is going to be a theme through this year's forum, because you can design, and you guys are experts in this. You can design a great vehicle and you can build it, but if you don't have the data to feed back, if you don't have the right maintenance and through life support, you have a very expensive piece of kit that's never going to achieve the capability outputs for which it's been budgeted for and designed for, and is required to keep people safe who are being put into harm's way. And that's, I think, is a critical issue along the way. So then the second topic is that of the electric vehicles. And I'm sure that's something that's being tossed around your work tables often. What are your thoughts at this stage about the challenges of the armouring and the electric vehicles and the batteries and the weight and the locations of where the batteries are in the base vehicles?
Yeah. It's a great subject to talk about, and it's fair to say there's some large challenges with electric vehicles. So I guess first of all, we're quite lucky to have expertise within the UTAC group, because we, as part of our suite of test services, we actually perform battery testing for OEMs and such like, so that, including, durability testing and battery abuse testing. So a whole host of legislative tests that we can perform, and and help to inform where we might go with this, I suppose. And we've been having that dialogue with our colleagues that run these tests, and so yeah, we put a bit of time into exploring this kind of subject. I guess it's early days, and although I think it will become something that we need to consider more in the future. I think we're still a little bit away from a civilian armored vehicle that's purely powered by battery. The challenges, there's some obvious ones, like the impact of the additional weight on range, because that's going to be a huge problem. The volatility of a battery pack when damaged, it's obviously going to be subject to more risk if it's in a civilian armored vehicle than it would be used in a on the public highway normally, say blast and ballistic events. Sorry. Then there's the potential issue of temperature control if we protect the pack with armor. So that element, and also, again, speaking to colleagues that test these, there's unlikely to be a one size fits all solution. All the OEMs design their packs differently, different shapes, sizes, locations. So what works for one vehicle may not work for another vehicle. So quite a few challenges there. And I think also, probably it's one of those ones where, at places like the CAV Forum and industry events, we probably want to talk to each other about this stuff and get input from everywhere, because I think the test standards will need to develop with technology as well. So and I also think we've got to make consideration for other fuel types. So hydrogen technology, particularly for heavier duty vehicles, is being developed by lots of different companies at the moment. So the thought of combining hydrogen and a blast or ballistic event is quite a scary proposition, I would say. So yeah. yeah.
The Hindenburg like a part.
Yeah. So yeah, lots of, and there, I mean, I think with the way technology is progressing and at the rate it's progressing, and in the automotive world, there are other challenges with modern vehicles as well. We all know about safety systems and how great they are, but they also hinder operational requirements when it comes to running a civilian armored vehicle. So, ADAS systems trying to prevent you from doing things, on the highway might prevent you from doing something that you want to do in a life-threatening scenario in somewhere, you don't want to be. So that's another area. Connected vehicles. So you've got your connected and autonomous vehicles, but also, vehicles nowadays are just generally connected. Modern cars have got SIM cards in, they're transmitting data, receiving data. So that means that, locations of vehicles are being transmitted. Where's that data stored? Lots of our customers don't want that data being stored willy-nilly. So, I mean, there's lots of things changing, and we're trying to keep up with that pace of change is, a challenge.
And, on the electric side, there's just the standard issue of, I'm not sure how many electric vehicle charging stations there are in the outskirts of Kabul, or in the back stations of Cameroon or of Congo or Somalia, etc. So it
Yeah.
might be that you can design and build it, but can you run it outside of
Yeah.
Munich, London,
Uh,
and Budapest?
I
Wherever.
mean, even in the UK, it's still a hot topic. The charging infrastructure, and certainly when we're talking to people like the emergency services, that's a huge challenge for
Absolutely.
those guys.
Yeah, and it's and sometimes you find in developments or the evolutions, I should say, that there are lags, and one is leading and the other one will start to follow. It's not done in a linear, cooperative manner, if you like, along the way. So then, you know, moving then through is, looking forward beyond even just the electric vehicles, which you've quite aptly described some of the challenges along the way there. Um, what do you see some of the big challenges for the civilian armoured vehicle industry? On one hand, we have great turmoil based out of America because of budget constraints with US aid, and that's affecting the humanitarian and NGO market. Together with that, but from a technical side or an operational side, what do you see some of the challenges coming up over the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, again, sort of harping back to the start of the interview, we are still quite UK centric in our customer base. But trying to expand, and it doesn't feel like the demand for CAVs is reducing anytime soon. So we're reviewing what we can offer the market, what products we've got currently available, what ones we want to look at developing in the future. So, always trying to stay relevant and have relevant products. Um, I guess like one of the challenges is we are always at the mercy of the OEM in terms of what products they have available, when one model will stop being produced, when another starts being produced. So, I think we've been lucky with the products that we've picked, to build upon so far. And, I think the industry as a whole was waited a long time for the Land Cruiser 300 series to be released and start production. And it feels like it's a great product. Um, but how long will that be in production? Who knows? What comes after that? Who knows? So you're always at the mercy of the OEM on that front.
Um, and it's the data. I remember talking with other manufacturers and just the data pack available for the new vehicles that come along. And Toyota tends to have about a 15-year life cycle of the model. If you go back to the hundreds, 105s, and then into the 200s and the 300s. So there is, from a commercial aspect, that investment equation of putting in now in the early stages where the volumes aren't there, but you have to invest in the development, certification, the testing, blast, ballistic, mobility, and then being able to offset that and pay it back over the course of production. And that's a commercial decision along the way.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think,
and I sympathise for the OEMs as well, because due to environmental policies and things like that, there's quite a moving target in terms of what they need to achieve and when. Particularly in the UK and Europe, targets for zero emission vehicles when internal combustion engines are going to stop being sold, things like that. These things are moving, and their design and development cycles can't just be changed at the drop of a hat. So,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And, there's maybe not quite as fast as we've seen in the past, but the evolutions of the armored steel technology and how they're making the armored steel and the glass. So if that hasn't changed dramatically, Brunels have changed high values. So you've got a lighter weight, high Brunel, a lighter weight steel. So you can use it thinner, which is terrific for ballistic, but not great for blast because Hybrunel is more brittle. So there's all these balances, and then the composites, ceramics that are being in. But again, if the world was restricted to a ballistic protected vehicle, life would certainly be easier. But the reality is that the bad guys still have a tendency to blow things up. And unfortunately, if you're in a car in such a situation, you want the vehicle obviously to protect along that. And so let me finish off with a final question then and say, if you put on your crystal ball hat, that's what it is, your thinking hat, but you take the crystal ball in your hand, and you could try and design, the ideal civilian armoured vehicle. Can you maybe tell us some of the characteristics that you think that you would like to do? Again, it's a wish list. We know that there's limitations, but leave aside that. Think a little bit outside the cabin, so to speak, outside.
Well, I mean, you've given me a great platform, and this is going to now sound really boring in my answer to this, but I suppose you're looking at something that is as close to the OEM base vehicle as possible, because as we've previously discussed, they spend millions and millions of pounds developing safe and clean vehicles, which is important. And so the less that we change that vehicle, probably the better. So what do we want? We want something that's lighter, more spacious, more reliable, safer, more discreet. All of these things that are the challenges in developing a civilian armored vehicle. So yeah, they're the things that I would incorporate into my ultimate armored vehicle. If budget, all the constraints we talked about, budget and time, and it, wasn't an issue. I think what I take though is it's really important to listen to the customer and their requirements. From a UTAC Special Vehicles perspective, we've got a fantastic group of engineers, technicians, and support staff, myself included, to the guys that are designing and developing these vehicles. But the ultimate armoured vehicle comes from a collaboration between all the parties involved over that vehicle's lifespan. So I think, one of the reasons we've been so successful is that we always try to engage everyone in the process and make use of the expertise that each of those parties bring, because we bring certain expertise, the operators do, the people that are procuring the vehicle do, but industry does, yourself included, Rob. There's a whole host of expertise out there, and it's trying to bring it all together. And I think we only find this out when we talk to each other at industry events like the CAV Forum, and that's why it's really useful to have these things. So yeah, collaboration and teamwork.
Look, absolutely, and I think to wrap things up, and this is the reason we're having these industry conversations, in that our view as an international consulting firm is that the more knowledge that users have, procurement agencies have, and they're a great challenge. They buy a vehicle, they'll drive it, or they'll maintain it, but they don't necessarily understand, appreciate the back end of it, which is where you guys come into it. And so the ability, and we see ourselves as that conduit to bring the up armourers, the component suppliers, the procurement people, through life support people, to bring everybody in together so that there's an enhancement of knowledge and appreciation of what these vehicles are, the role they play in protecting people who are being put in harm's way. And at the end of the day, is coming home to your family for dinner is the number one result that you're looking for.
Absolutely.
And if it's going to take an extra dollar and an extra hour of thinking time, an extra hour of production, then let it be so. Our role is to make it for $0.50 for a half an hour of time, to make it more efficient, of course. But the integrity of the protection, the mobility, the discretion, that's what we're on about. Very good. All right. So look, Andy, thank you so much for your time. It's been a privilege to talk to you, and it's always, we've known each other for a few years now, and I always enjoy our discussions because you're very knowledgeable and you see that broader perspective. And I think from the purpose of industry, I think that's you're a great asset, and your company produces excellent vehicles. And I haven't visited your plant as yet, your factory as yet, but I look forward to on my next trips to the UK. So
there's always an open invitation, and thanks, Rob. It's been an absolute pleasure, and yeah, thanks for all your help over the years that we've known each other. As I say, I think what you're doing for the industry is great. So yeah, long may it continue.
Excellent. Thank you so much, and I wish you well.
Thank you.